Katie. Hey, gorgeous.
Nick singing. It's nice.
Pardon?
Is that Nick singing?
No, it was the music.
Nice. Sounded like it was just a person singing.
I thought it was Nick as well.
I wish. Hey, Zach.
Hi, Zach's wall.
Oh, dear. The other knee of my jeans is ripped.
What?
No. I sometimes wish my jeans would rip in places where I could do cool and interesting and pretty repairs instead of on the inner thighs, which I don't particularly want to do.
The inner thighs of this are completely covered in repairs, and the jeans themselves also have paint and stuff all over them. They're my comfy but not very pretty jeans.
I've tried repairing like inner thigh rips, but I find it then just like goes at like just above where I just repaired not long after.
You need to patch it. Big patches of
the whole,
stretchy
like, area just
fabric.
wears thin.
I do find like it doesn't last super long. Like when I repair the inner, I could like there are some jeans I've got that just repairs. I don't actually think I've got any jeans currently that aren't patched on the inner thighs.
I always try and own one pair.
Hi, Frankie.
Hey, Frankie.
Nice cup of tea.
Oh, thank you, Father.
Hello.
Y'all doing?
Got to be in the catch-up crew today.
You want my love?
I got to be in the catch-up crew today.
I got to be in the catch-up crew today. Oh, because you were a sleepy muffin.
Relatable.
Cute, cute. Was it nice? Did you have fun in the catch-up crew? Was the rest of the catch-up crew nice to you? Okay, good. Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Was it weird seeing yourself asleep in the gallery view?
It's less weird than seeing yourself awake.
Fair, very fair. Hi, Kim. Hmm. Zach, are you going to?
I haven't seen you in ages.
What?
Hey, Jenny.
Hey. I was saying hi to Kim. Hi.
Oh.
I was saying hi to everybody in general, but I haven't seen Kim more. So, hello.
I have a baking question that maybe Zach or Frankie could help me with.
What's the question?
I'm going to make that orangey ginny upside down cake thing. It says I need to do it in a cast iron pot or a tart tartan tin, neither of which I have. So I have options of, I have the right size cake tin, but I can't just put the syrup directly into it because it isn't, it's like a spring form. So I could like line that with foil or origami baking paper as an option. Or I've got like a flan tart tin thing, but it's not very deep. So I'm not 100% sure how much cake I could fit into it. Or how deep a tart tartan tin is. Who knows these things? Or I could just do it in like a loaf tin.
I would probably be most inclined to do it in a loaf tin. If it were me, I think I would go loaf tin.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Zach?
Yeah, I was thinking similar. I mean, it depends. When you say spring form tin, is that one of the ones with like the loose bottom that detaches kind of thing? Depends how tight to fit that is, whether it would actually leak out or if it's like quite close fitting, it might be okay.
I think I would still need to like, because it's quite like the syrup isn't super thick yet. So I would definitely, I couldn't just put it straight, the orange and syrup mix straight into it. Otherwise it would
And
help.
a particular recipe which calls for a tart tatin tin, which Bean doesn't have, how it can be most profitably.
Someone needs to mute Frankie.
Another baking question. What is the difference between caster and granulated sugar?
Is it just like the size of the granules?
Yeah, it is. The caster sugars are really refined into like almost a powder.
So caster sugar is finer than granulated.
Dissolves quicker.
Okay, so but basically it's like, yeah, okay. Because I found a recipe that called for both the lemon drizzle, and they wanted caster sugar in the dough, but granulated sugar for the drizzle, and I'm like, I'm not gonna buy 2 different kinds of sugar, you silly folks. It'll melt anyway. So.
Yeah. If it's a kind of thing where it's melting, then I think probably just caster sugar for everything. Like, I think the only thing that I can think where granulated would be good is if you were using sugar in a way that it wasn't supposed to melt, like if you were kind of crystallizing something, like you would with demerara, if you wanted like a sugary crunch.
I put granulated sugar in my drizzle and it forms like a lemony crunchy topping, which is a Mary Berry thing.
So the granulated sugar does make sense for the top.
But would caster not do the same thing if it was like, if it's dissolved in the...
Well, the thing is, it's in the drizzle, so it's not dissolving. You just mix it together and pour it on.
Ooh.
Okay, I'm gonna have to find out what granulated sugar is in them. I don't know. So okay, sorry, I didn't want to.
That's okay.
No, this is
distract from the tin problem.
Does everybody anyone else have any baking problems? I'm quite enjoying this sort of baking forum.
I'm making the tiniest rhubarb crumble.
You want my dad?
How tiny is it?
It's a 1-person portion.
Oh,
surely
a pot
any
this
rhubarb.
size from the rhubarb that I'm growing in a pot.
Oh,
Tiny.
cute.
That's so cute.
That's like half a
There
pot.
was no more for it. Literally 3 stalks making that much.
Will you take a picture and put it on the group after you have made it? I would love to see this tiny crumble.
Also, if we're coming into rhubarb season, I've got a really good recipe somewhere for rhubarb and ginger cake that's sort of also an upside down cakey thing, and the top is all like syrupy and amazing.
Oh my god.
Because at some point we hit rhubarb season for the veg fruit box combo that we get. And then I just have to bake every week for like 6 weeks.
Oh no.
Rhubarb and ginger jam.
Rhubarb
How
compote.
terrible.
With lemon.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Just a rhubarb compote, make it and put it on everything. Like, it works with porridge, it works with cake, it works with, I'm sure, any other grain that you could possibly think of.
Rhubarb gin.
Yes.
I mean, my parents tend to keep us quite well in rhubarb and ginger jam, so I never bother making it because they have an allotment, so they keep us quite well in jam.
If you are somebody who is able to eat gelatin, and you can make a rhubarb jelly and make that into a trifle, and so you have like rhubarb and custard trifle.
That does sound like it could be good.
Can I ask what a cheating baking question before Katie speaks very quickly? Who knows where to buy, like which supermarket to buy frozen short crust pastry from? Because I want to make an apple pie tomorrow night. I have no idea, and I looked today and couldn't find it. Sorry, Tesco? Okay, cool. I'll go and find a Tesco.
Sometimes you'll find it ready rolled instead of frozen.
Ah,
With
okay.
butter.
Buy the butter and dairy things normally.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Good to know.
Just roll.
Thank you.
I found out what granulated and caster sugar are.
Story time. Story time. Well then. Well. Thank you for telling me. Okay, everybody. Now, it's the second last night. It's the second last night.
It's the semi-final.
It's the semi-final. What? Okay. Here we go. we go? Let's mute everybody. Oh, this baking chat has got me well juiced up. Right. So, if you will remember, the last we heard is that Jason has gifts for us all, apparently. Now, I'm sitting comfortably. Then I'll begin. "102. Me and Bobby had a little reunion drink in the Black Bridge after we all left here. In Le Pont Noir, anyway." Jason Ritchie takes a swig from his bottle of beer. Ron has a beer too, as he always does if Jason is around. It is important to be a role model. "You could tell we sort of trusted each other, you know? It felt like we both changed for the better over the years. Bobby wouldn't let on what he's up to these days, but he seemed happy, so fair play. I don't suppose anyone wants to tell me what he does now." Jason looks expectantly at Elizabeth and Joyce, and they both shake their heads. "Good," says Jason. "No one likes the grass. But we still couldn't be sure, you know? Couldn't be certain one of us hadn't done it. Couldn't be sure that it was Gianni, alive and kicking and back for revenge. So I made a call." "Ooh, who to?" asks Joyce. Jason smiles. "What does no one like, Joyce?" Joyce nods her defeat. "A grass, Jason." "Let's say I called a friend, someone we all trusted, but someone who Gianni would have trusted too, for different reasons. And he came down, no choice really if it's the two of us ringing, and we asked him straight out, 'Has Gianni been over? You seen him? Just between us and it never goes further.'" "And had he?" asks Elizabeth. "He had," says Jason. "Gianni came over 3 days before Tony was murdered and left the day he died. He blamed Tony for grassing him up all those years ago, so he said. Who knows with Gianni?" Joyce nods sagely and Jason continues. "Maybe he just felt the time was right. Put the record straight. Some people have long memories." "And you trust this source? And Peter trusts him?" asks Elizabeth. "Peter?" asks Jason. "Sorry, Bobby," says Elizabeth. "That's my age showing. You and Bobby both trust him?" "With our lives," Jason says. "He's the straightest shooter you'll find. And he had his reasons to help Gianni. If your friends in the police don't work out who the guy is, then I promise I'll tell him. But I reckon they're bright enough to work it out." "Why did Gianni send you the photograph, Jason?" asks Ibrahim. Jason shrugs. "I think he just wanted us to know it was him. Showing off. Gianni was always like that. He could find my address pretty easy too, everyone knows me round here. Whatever Gianni did, he always had to tell you." "And did Gianni look the same? What was his new name?" asks Elizabeth. Jason shakes his head. "None of our business. We just asked what we asked. We just wanted to know for sure. That was enough." "Shame," says Elizabeth. "Well, if the police don't track him down, I'm sure you four will," says Jason. "And listen, me and Bobby, we just wanted to say thank you for bringing us together and for helping us to get to the truth. None of this would have happened without you. Let's be honest, without you, I'd probably be banged up for this. So I got you all a little something, if that's okay." That's definitely okay. Jason unzips a sports bag at his feet and pulls out his gifts. He hands a wooden box to Ibrahim. "Ibrahim, cigars. Cuban, of course." "That is the height of urbanity, Jason. Thank you," says Ibrahim. The next gift goes to Ron. Dad, a bottle of wine, and a nice one too. You can stop pretending you still prefer beer in front of me. John takes his gift. Oh, a drop of white. Thanks, Jace. Jason hands Joyce an envelope. Joyce, 2 tickets to come up and see Celebrity Ice Dance being filmed next month. Joyce beams. VIP, all that. I thought you could bring Joanna. Oh, not Joanna, says Joyce. It's ITV and she won't have that on. And Elizabeth, says Jason, with nothing in his hand but his phone. My gift to you is this. Jason holds up his phone and very deliberately swipes his finger across the screen and then puts it back in his pocket. He looks to Elizabeth, who isn't sure how to react. Well, thank you, Jason, although I rather was hoping for some cocoa by Chanel, says Elizabeth. I think I know what you'd like more than that, though, says Jason. To catch whoever killed Ian Bentham. Is that in your gift, Jason? Asks Elizabeth. I reckon it is. Dad and I worked it out, didn't we, Dad? Ron nods. We did, son. And, without wanting to sound cocky, says Jason, I reckon that one little swipe will confirm it. $103. Joyce. I wonder if you know about Tinder. I had heard about it on the radio, heard jokes about it, but I had never seen it before Jason showed me. If you know what it is, then you can skip through this bit. So, Tinder is for dating. You post pictures of yourself on an app. An app is like the internet, but only on your phone. Jason showed me some of the pictures. The pictures of the men are usually on a mountain or chopping down a tree. Sometimes the pictures have been cropped down the middle to cut out a former partner. Thanks to my picture in Cut to the Chase, I know how they do that now. The pictures of the women are often on boats or with groups of other women, and you're not sure which one you're supposed to be looking at, so I suppose you take pot luck. I asked him if people use it for one-night stands, and he says that by and large people use it for little else. Well, that's a bit of fun, you could say, but the whole thing felt unhappy to me. And the more smiles I saw, the unhappier I felt. Perhaps that's just me. I met Jerry at a dance I had decided to go to at the last minute to spite my mother. If I hadn't gone, then we never would have met. So, I know that's an inefficient way of finding true love, but it worked for us. From the moment I laid my eyes on him, he didn't stand a chance. The lucky thing. So, on Tinder, you scroll through photographs of single people who live nearby, or sometimes married people who live nearby. There is a picture of Ian Bentham on Tinder in a karate suit, even though he's dead. Every time you like the look of someone, you swipe their picture to the right or to the left, I can't remember. Meanwhile, somewhere nearby, they are scrolling through pictures too, and if they like the look of you, they also swipe to the right or left, and the two of you are a match. Honestly, it breaks your heart to scroll through. It reminded me of those photos of lost cats you see on lampposts. It's all that hope, I suppose. Anyway, when Jason swiped right or left, he was confident of a match. and he was confident that match would be the killer. I trust his confidence on the first matter. I am more dubious about the second. There is another dating app for gay men called Grindr. Perhaps it's for gay women too? I don't know, I didn't ask. Would they use the same one? That would be nice, I think. So Jason imagines he has solved the case. And perhaps he has, though I doubt it very much. He says it's obvious, but often in these matters, the answer isn't obvious at all. At least I have discovered that online dating is not for me. You can have too much choice in this world. And when everyone has too much choice, it is also much harder to get chosen. And we all want to be chosen. Good night, all. Good night, Bernard. And good night, Jerry, my love. (104). Having spent a very happy morning preparing, changing outfits and texting friends, Karen Playfair is now alone for a moment, sitting in an unfamiliar armchair. She is shaking her head, thinking about the optimism of this morning and then the reality of the lunch she's just had. Karen has had some bad dates on Tinder, but this was the first time that someone had accused her of murder. The match had pinged onto her phone yesterday evening. Jason Ritchie. Well, I don't mind if I do, she had thought. This is a cut above your average. He'd messaged, she'd messaged, and before you knew it, there they were in Le Pont Noir, ordering a crayfish salad with radicchio. A whirlwind romance in the offing. Karen shifts in her armchair and idly picks up a magazine from a pile on the coffee table. It's more of a newsletter, really. Cut to the chase. Back to the date. There had been some small talk, not too much. Karen knew very little about boxing and Jason knew very little about IT. Lightly sparkling water arrived, and that's when Jason mentioned Ian Bentham. Karen immediately realised that this wasn't a date and felt foolish. But worse was to come. She can hear Ron Ritchie in his kitchen now. He's opening a bottle of wine. Jason's nipped to the loo. She starts flicking through Cut to the Chase, but her mind keeps going back to Le Pont Noir. All those questions Jason had fired at her. Hadn't she been there the morning Ian Bentham was killed? Yes, she had. Wasn't her dad refusing to sell his land to Ian Bentham? Well, yes, he was, but look, here comes our crayfish. Didn't she want her dad to sell the land to take the money? That was her advice, yes, but it was her dad's business. Surely if he sold, then some of that money would be coming to her. Well, you could certainly assume that, Jason, but why not just come out with it and say what you want to say? And so he did. It was almost funny, thinks Karen, reliving it. She hears the loo flush. What was it he had said? Jason had leaned forward, very sure, certain, in fact. You see, the police had been looking for someone who was there in the 1970s and was still there now, and they had been right in a way. They'd found bones, and maybe someone had been murdered all those years ago. But forget the bones, they were missing the simplest trick in the book, greed. Bentham was in the way of Karen making her millions. Her dad wasn't budging, and so Bentham had to go. Jason mentioned some drugs you could only get on the dark web, and didn't Karen work in IT? Wasn't that convenient? Jason had solved the case and felt sure he was about to get a confession. Honestly, some men. He hadn't expected Karen to laugh in his face and explain that she was a database administrator for a secondary school who could no more access the dark web than fly to the moon. That she had misheard Jason's mention of fentanyl as Ventolin and had wondered what he was on about. That she lived in one of the most beautiful places in England, and while she certainly would swap that for £1 million, she would rather be there with her dad happy than in some executive new build in Hove with her dad miserable. Jason looked like he was going to come back with a clever response, but when he tried, none came. Jason walks back into the room, and Karen remembers how crestfallen he had looked. He knew she was telling the truth, that his little theory was wrong. He had apologised and offered to leave, but Karen had wondered if they shouldn't make the best out of a bad deal and enjoy the rest of their lunch. What if they ended up together? Wouldn't this be the greatest "and how did you two meet" story of all time? Which set them both laughing and set them both talking and turned the whole thing into a lovely, long, boozy lunch. Which is why Jason had asked her back here for another drink and to do a bit of explaining to his dad. Right on cue, Ron Ritchie walks in with a nice bottle of white and 3 glasses. Jason sits down next to her and takes the glasses from his dad. He really has been charm itself since he accused her of murder. Karen Playfair puts her copy of Cut to the Chase back down on the pile. And as she does, she sees the photograph. Halfway down the page. She picks the newsletter up again and stares closely, just to make sure. "You all right, Karen?" asks Jason, as Ron pours the wine. "The police wanted someone who was here in the 70s, who's still here now?" asks Karen, slowly and carefully. "That's what they reckon," says Jason. "Obviously, I thought they were wrong, but we saw how that played out." Jason laughs, but Karen does not. She looks at Ron and points to the face in the photograph. "Someone who was here in the 70s and is still here now." Ron looks, but his brain won't take it in. "You're sure?" he manages to ask. "It was a long time ago, but I'm sure." Ron's mind is travelling at speed. This can't be. He's searching for reasons why this must be wrong, but can find none. He puts the wine down on the coffee table and picks up Cut to the Chase. "I need to go and talk to Elizabeth." "105. Steve's gym looks a lot like its owner. A squat brick building, intimidating at first sight, but with the door always open and everyone always welcome. Chris and Donna step over the threshold. After the excitement in the graveyard yesterday, Chris and Donna had gone back to Fairhaven and checked on Joe Cipriani's hunch about the original investigation. No one from Kent Police had ventured into Northern Cyprus. There was no mention of Gianni's family connections. There had been no meaningful investigation at all. Chris had seen the names of the 2 officers who had been sent to Nicosia. No surprises. They'd have come back with tans and hangovers and nothing else. He and Donna had then been having another look at all those passenger lists coming in from Larnaca to Heathrow and Gatwick in the week before the murder. Nearly 3,000 names, mainly men and mainly Cypriots. Looking through list after list of names, Chris remembered something else that Joe Cipriani had said. If Gianni had come to the UK, he would have needed help. A fellow Cypriot would be the obvious choice. Did Chris know any? As the names flashed before his eyes, he realised that he did. They had then gone back to the original Tony Curran file. There was no doubt that, in the early days, Steve Georgiou had been in and around the Tony Curran crew. Mentioned in dispatches, but never anything to bring him in for. And whatever he had been doing for Tony hadn't lasted long. He'd opened Steve's gym ages ago, and it had gone from strength to strength, as it were. Chris and Donna both knew officers who trained there. Decent officers, too, not fools. The place had a good reputation, and that wasn't the case with all gyms. Even today, the gym was packed. A Wednesday afternoon, an atmosphere of quiet, hard work, no preening and posturing. Chris has been meaning to join a gym, but at the moment he was waiting for his knee to stop hurting. No point aggravating it. As soon as it has settled down, he'll join. Take the bull by the horns. He had felt a sharp stabbing pain in his arm after the run up the hill to the graveyard to save Elizabeth. Almost certainly nothing, but even so. Steve had been expecting them and met them by the door with a crushing handshake and a huge smile. They are now in his office. Steve is sitting on a yoga ball and chatting happily. Listen, you know as well as anyone, we don't have trouble here and we don't cause trouble here, says Steve Georgiou. Oh, I do know that, agrees Chris. The opposite, innit? You know that. We take people in, we turn them around. No secrets, you just ask whatever, yeah? I was in Cyprus recently, Steve. Steve stops smiling and bounces a little. Okay. I didn't really know much about it before I went. I just thought, holidays, you know. It's very beautiful, says Steve Georgiou. Are we just gossiping or what? What are you, Steve? Greek Cypriot or Turkish Cypriot? Asks Donna. There's a beat. Very short, but very telling to a good copper. Steve shakes his head. I don't get involved in all that. Not for me. People are people. We're agreed on that, Steve, says Chris. But even so, what side of the line were you? We can probably find out another way, but since we're here... Turkish, says Steve Georgiou. Turkish Cypriot. He shrugs. It's of no concern. Chris nods his head and writes something down, just keeping Steve waiting for a moment. Like Gianni Gunduz. Steve Georgiou tilts his head to the side and looks at Chris and you. That's a name for a long time ago. Isn't it, though, says Chris. Anyway, that's why I was in Cyprus, trying to track him down. Steve Georgiou smiles. He's long gone. Gianni was crazy. Good luck to the guy, but someone would have killed him by now. Guaranteed. Well, that would explain why we can't find him. But you know, Steve, I'm a police officer, and sometimes something doesn't seem right. That's the job, innit? Says Steve Georgiou. I want to suggest a story, says Chris. Just something we've been thinking about. And you don't have to say anything. You don't have to react, just listen. Can you do that? I've got to be honest with you. I've got a gym to run, and I still don't know what you're doing here. Donna holds up a hand and concedes the point. You're right, but just hear us out. 2 minutes and you'll be back out there. 2 minutes, accepts Steve. You're one of the good guys, Steve, says Chris. I know that. I don't hear a bad word about you. I appreciate that. Thank you, says Steve. But here's what I worry has happened, continues Chris. I think a few weeks ago you get a message, or maybe it's just a knock at the door, I don't know. Either way, it's Gianni Gunduz. Nope, says Steve Georgiou, shaking his head. And Gianni needs help. He's back in town for something. Maybe he doesn't say what, maybe he does. And he turns to you a little favour for old time's sake. Somewhere to stay? Maybe just that. He doesn't want a record of whatever his new name is anywhere in town. And no one's to know. I haven't seen Gianni Kunduz in 20 years. He's dead, or he's in prison, or he's in Turkey, says Steve Georgiou. Maybe, says Chris. But Gianni could be trouble if he doesn't get what he wants. He could burn this place down pretty easily, I'd have thought. He's the type to do it too, so maybe you had no choice. And it's only a couple of days. He's just got to deliver a couple of things, then tie up a loose end. Then he'll be gone. How does that sound to you, Steve? Steve Georgiou shrugs. Like a pretty dangerous story. You've got a flat above the gym? Asks Donna. Steve nods. Who stays there? Anyone who needs to. Not everyone who comes in here is from a stable background. The kid tells me he can't go home. I don't ask the reason. I just hand him the keys. It's a safe place. Who was staying in the flat on June the 17th? Asks Chris. No idea. I'm not the Hilton. Maybe some kid, maybe me. Maybe no one, asks Donna. Steve Georgiou shrugs. But you think maybe someone, says Chris. Maybe. Gianni is very well connected, Steve. In Cyprus, says Chris. Not my world. You've still got family over there, asks Donna. Yes, says Steve Georgiou. Lots of family. Steve, if Gianni Kunduz had come here and asked if he could stay, begins Chris, if he put pressure on you of any kind, or maybe he paid you, if you agreed, if he slept upstairs on June 17th, there's no way you would tell me. No. Consequences too great. Consequences for family in Cyprus. I think that's been 2 minutes, if we're honest. Agreed, says Chris. Thank you, Steve. Anytime. You're always welcome here. I mean that. We could sort that gut out in a heartbeat. Chris smiles. It had crossed my mind, Steve. I don't suppose there's any way I could take a look upstairs before I go. Just see if Gianni left anything. Steve Georgiou shakes his head. You could do me a favour, though. Go on, says Chris. Could you stick this in lost property? Someone dropped it a couple of weeks ago and I've asked and asked, but I don't know who it belongs to. Steve reaches into a drawer and pulls out a clear plastic wallet filled with cash and hands it to Chris. 5,000 euros. Some tourists must be kicking themselves. Chris looks at the cash, looks at Donna, then back at Steve. Would this have prints on? Doubtful, but at least Steve is letting him know he's right. You don't want to keep it. Steve Georgiou shakes his head. No, I know where it's been. Chris hands the envelope to Donna and she puts it in an evidence bag. They both know that Steve Georgiou has just been very brave. Chris stands and shakes him by the hand. I know Tony Curran was a bastard, says Steve Georgiou, but he didn't deserve that. Agreed, says Chris, up to a point. Anyway, me and my gut will be back here soon. Good lad. (106). Elizabeth leaves Stephen sleeping. Bogdan will be around after work for a game of chess. She hopes they will both be there when she gets back. She'll need the company. The knob has come off the bedroom wardrobe door, and Elizabeth casually leaves it on the kitchen table. She bets that Bogdan won't be able to resist fixing it. Ron had come to her with a photograph that Karen Playfair had seen. Karen would have been young at the time, but she was sure. Elizabeth had tried to piece it all together in her head. It seemed impossible at first. But the more she thought about it, it began to seem horribly true. She worked out the steps one by one. Ibrahim had come back an hour ago with the final piece of the jigsaw, so now is the time. The case is solved, and only justice remains. Elizabeth walks out into the cold evening air, not turning back now. The skies are getting darker earlier, and the scarves are coming out of the wardrobes. Summer is still keeping a lid on autumn, but it won't be long. How many more autumns for Elizabeth? How many more years of slipping on a pair of comfortable boots and walking through the leaves? One day, spring will come without her. The daffodils will always come up by the lake, but you won't always be there to see them. So it goes. Enjoy them while you can. But right now, with a job at hand, Elizabeth feels an affinity with the late summer. The leaves clinging gamely on, the last hurrah of the heat, the odd trick still up its sleeve. She sees Ron making his way over, grim-faced but ready. Hiding his limp, keeping his pain to himself. What a fine friend Ron is, she thinks. What a heart he has. Long may it go on beating. As she turns the corner, she sees Ibrahim waiting by the door, folder in hand. The last piece of the jigsaw. How handsome he looks, dressed for the occasion, ready to do whatever's necessary. That Ibrahim might ever die seems absurd to Elizabeth. He will certainly be the last of them. The last oak in the forest, standing still and true as the aeroplanes whiz overhead. How to begin, thinks Elizabeth. How to even begin? "107. Chris gets the nod. An international warrant has been issued for the arrest of Gianni Gunduz for questioning over the murder of Tony Curran. A good end to the day. The euros Steve Georgiou gave them had no prints, but had been taken out at a bureau de change in northern Cyprus 3 days before Tony Curran's murder. He'd given Joe Cipriano the address of the bureau in case of CCTV, but Joe had taken one look at the address and laughed. No chance. Would the Cypriot authorities ever find him? Who knew? You'd think so, but after the initial rush, how hard is anyone really going to look? Maybe Chris will even get another trip over to Cyprus. That would be nice. Either way, he's done all he can, and it's up to the Cypriots now if they fancy their chances. Whatever happens, Chris will look good. It is a cause for celebration, but Chris has had too many nights in the pub with too many coppers over the years. What he'd really wanted was a curry at home, get Donna round, watch something on TV, bottle of wine and send her home at 10. Maybe talk a bit about Bentham? What have they missed? Chris had a worrying thought earlier. A stupid one, really. Only, hadn't the convent had a hospital all those years ago? Wasn't Joyce an ex-nurse? Run the name Joyce Meadowcroft through the computer? Could he talk to Donna about it? But Donna had a mystery date tonight. Casually dropped it into the conversation on the way back from Steve's gym. So he would go home and have a night in by himself with a curry. Chris knew that that was where this was heading. The darts was on Skye. Chris wondered whether this was a tragic plan, or simply the sort of plan that people would think was tragic. Was he a content man doing the things he liked alone? Or was he a lonely man making the best out of what he had? Alone or lonely? This question cropped up so often these days, Chris could no longer be confident of his answer. Though if he were a betting man, his money would be on lonely. Where was his date? If he leaves right now, it will be rush hour. So Chris closes the Tony Curran file and opens up the Ventham file. If he can solve one murder, he can surely solve two more. What has he missed? Who has he missed? $108. They make their way along the corridor, Elizabeth and Ibrahim, with Ron carrying a couple of extra chairs. A job to do. Behind them, double doors swing open and Joyce hurries after her friends. Sorry I'm late. The beeper was going off on my oven and I couldn't work out why. Sometimes it can be a very brief power outage. Then the clock tries to reset itself, says Ibrahim. Joyce nods. Without thinking, she takes Ibrahim's hand. Ahead of them, Elizabeth has taken Ron's hand too, and they walk in silence until they reach the door. Despite the circumstances, Elizabeth knocks, as she always does. She opens the door, and there he is. The man Karen Playfair had recognised after all those years. His picture next to Ron, holding the fox that he had saved. The same old book is open at the same old page. He looks up and sees unsurprised to see the four of them there. Ah, the gang's all here. The gang's all here, John, confirms Elizabeth. Do you mind if we sit? John gestures for them to do exactly that. He puts down his book and pinches the bridge of his nose. Ron looks over at Penny, comatose on the bed. Nothing left of her, really, he thinks. Gone. Why hasn't he been to see her? Why had it taken this? How shall we do this, John? Asks Elizabeth. Up to you, Elizabeth, replies John. I've been waiting for that knock since the moment I did it. Just took each day as a bonus. I do wish you'd taken a bit longer, though. What was it in the end? Karen Playfair recognised you, said Ibrahim. John nods and smiles to himself. Did she? Little Karen. Goodness. You put her dog to sleep when she was 6, John, says Joyce. She says she would never forget your kind eyes. Elizabeth is in her customary seat at the foot of Penny's bed. Do you want to start, John? Or shall we? Shall I? Says John, and shuts his eyes. I've been over it so many times in my head. Who is in the grave, John? Whose bones are they? Eyes still shut, John looks up to the heavens, lets out a sigh from the ages, and begins. It would have been the early 70s, maybe 10 miles from here. Grey Scott, one of the sheep farms. There used to be any number around here, you know. Long time ago now. I think I'd started in 1967. Penny would remember for sure, but around then anyway. The farmer was an old boy called Matheson, and I knew him well enough by that point. I'd go out there every now and again. You know, something would happen. This time around, he'd had a mare just given birth. The foal had died and the mare was in distress. She was in such pain, screaming, and he hadn't wanted to shoot her, which I understood, so I gave her an injection, and that was that. Done it many times before and since. Some farmers will just shoot them, some vets will too, but not Matheson, and not me. Anyway, he made me a cup of tea and we got chatting. I was always in a hurry, but I think he was a very lonely man. There was no family, no one to help him on the farm, money running out, so I think he welcomed the company. It was very bleak up there. That's how it seemed to me that day. I had to be on my way, but he didn't want me to leave. You will judge me, I know, or perhaps you won't, but suddenly something seemed clear as day to me. He was in distress, great distress. If Matheson had been an animal, he would have been screaming. You have to believe that. And so I reached into my bag and I offered him a flu shot, you know, see him through the winter and all that. He was glad of the offer. He rolled up his sleeve and I gave him his shot. The same shot I'd just given the mare. And that was the end of the screaming and the end of the pain. You put him out of his misery, John? Asks Joyce. That's how I saw it. Then and now. If I'd had my wits about me, I would have conjured up some clever little concoction, something that wouldn't show up in a post-mortem, and left him there to be found by the postman, or the milk van, or whoever knocked there next. But it was spur of the moment, so there he was, pumped full of pentobarbital, and I couldn't take the risk that someone might look into it. So you had to bury him? This Matheson? Asks Elizabeth. Quite so. I would have buried him there and then, but you'll remember they were buying up farmland left, right and centre those days, building houses everywhere, and I thought it'd just be just my luck to bury him, then have him dug up by builders a month later. And that's when I remembered. The graveyard, says Ron. It was perfect. I knew it from visiting Gordon Playfair. It wasn't on farmland and no one was going to be buying a convent, for heaven's sake. I knew how quiet it was. I knew no one visited. So I drove up one night, a couple of days later, lights off, picked up my spade and did the deed. And that was that, until one day, 40 years later, I saw an advert for this place. And here we all are, says Elizabeth. And here we all are. I persuaded Penny it would be a lovely place to retire to, and I wasn't wrong there. I just wanted to keep an eye on things. You think they won't dig up a graveyard, but you never know these days, and I wanted to be close by in case the worst happened. Which it did, John, says Joyce. I couldn't dig the body back up. Too old, too feeble. And I couldn't risk the grave being dug up and the body being found. So, in the panic of that morning, in all the chaos while we were holding him back, I slid a syringe into Bentham's arm, and seconds later he was dead, which is unforgivable in every way. Unforgivable. And from that moment, I've been waiting for you to come, and I've been waiting to face the consequences of what I've done. How did you magically have a syringe filled with fentanyl, John? Asks Elizabeth. John smiles. I've had it for a long time, in case I ever needed it here, if they ever wanted to move Penny. John looks at Elizabeth through clear eyes. I'm glad it was you, at least, Elizabeth, and not the police. I'm glad you solved it. I knew you would. I'm glad too, John, says Elizabeth. And thank you for telling your story. You know we will have to tell the police. I know. We don't need to do it this very second, though. While it's just us, can I clarify 2 little things? Of course. It was a long time ago, but I'll help if I can. I think you and I agree, John, that Penny probably doesn't hear what goes on in this room. Whatever silly nonsense we say to her, that we're kidding ourselves, really. John nods. But I think we're also agreed that maybe she can. Just maybe. Maybe she hears it all. Maybe, agrees John. In which case, John, perhaps she can hear us now. Perhaps. Even if there's the slightest chance, John, the slightest chance that Penny heard what you just said, why would you do that to her? Why put her through that? Well, you wouldn't, John. That's the truth. That would have been torture, says Elizabeth. Ibrahim sits forward. John, you said that killing Ian Bentham was unforgivable. And I believe truly that you mean that. It was an act beyond your imagining. And yet you ask us to believe that you committed that act simply to save your own skin? That doesn't ring true, I'm afraid. You committed an act you knew to be unforgivable. And I'm afraid we see only one reason for that. Love, John, says Joyce. Always love. John looks at the 4 of them, each implacable. I sent Ibrahim to have a look at one of Penny's files this morning, says Elizabeth. Ibrahim takes a small manila file from his shopping bag and hands it to Elizabeth. She opens the file on her lap. Shall we get to the truth?
Nick is unaware of this mug.
Called it.
What?
Second episode. Called it.
I mean, that was Tony Curran, and we don't know he did the Tony Curran one.
That's true.
But they almost had me. They almost had me with the Penny thing. I was almost not Penny thing with the
Joyce.
Joyce thing.
Yeah,
It was about 2 minutes. About 2 minutes before that, I was like, hang on a minute. That's it's going to be Penny, isn't it? Almost fell for it.
I loved how he wrote Joyce talking about internet and Tinder.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, Joyce. Oh, exciting times. So, what do people reckon? What happened? What's the truth?
This is a very sick town. Everyone just kills everyone.
True, very true.
The corpse is actually every single one of Penny's files. It has a single bone in that corpse. It's a puzzle corpse of all of the missing people over like decades.
Jesus. Bleak,
Wow.
man.
Wow. That's the prediction coming from the voice in the dark.
Yeah, it's all very sinister.
I also love the date between Karen Playfair and
Oh, Jason.
that was so cool. Like it was so well written.
I hope they do end up together. I think that would be cute.
Yeah.
It's all gone really twisty-turny. I've definitely lost track of who I think has done this.
So many red herrings.
Yeah, wonder where the Bramley thing will come back into it as well.
Yeah.
Bramley Holding Company.
You should have done like a poll at the end of every session and then made like a graph of who everyone suspected over time.
That would have been very satisfying to see the different levels of suspicion.
Yeah.
Even in this one episode, like I was like, it's definitely Joyce. Got it. Oh shit, no, it's not.
It still might be Joyce.
No, it's definitely Penny. I think we've solved that now, right?
Oh, but we haven't. There are multiple murders here.
Penny committed the murder that led to the bones, the extra bones, I think, and John.
He was covering for Joyce.
Killing Ian Bentham.
Maybe Joyce killed someone 50 years ago and Penny covered for her.
But so Elizabeth was Joyce's didn't they work together?
No, they met at the thing.
Ah, okay.
First episode. But John and Joyce might have known each other from back in the day.
This is true, they might have done. Although Joyce is from the north.
Oh yeah.
I just said I love that there are episodes now. They're no longer chapters. You've got a whole show going, Frankie.
I mean, there was like 5 chapters in this session. I guess session would be accurate.
I like them being episodes.
Yeah.
Previously on Storytime.
Oh, can we have that now?
Yes. Every time we do a recap. But I'm not recapping this book tomorrow because I think my tongue would fall off if I tried.
What we need is a Storytime theme song.
Well, I sort of do have from like the one story that I managed to record for the hospital before lockdown Mark II kicked in and I couldn't go back. I did have a little jingle picked out.
Nice.
So maybe I'll email Elliot and ask if he can like send me the file.
How did it go? Could you sing it?
No.
As I wander around my flat going, story time, it's the time for stories. Most of the time when getting ready for stories.
You have to sing that for the intro and the Okonomiyaki song for the outro.
Okonomiyaki. Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, we should say goodbye to the catch-up crew.
Mm-hmm.
Catch-up crew. Catch-up. 1 second. 1 second.
Good goodness.
Shh. I'm very good at this. Okay. Catch-up crew. We love you. Who did you think it was? Answers on a postcard.
Was it them all along?
Catch-up crew. Was it you? You sneaky catch-up crew.